Welcome to Rational Discourse Weekly. It's episode 17, filmed on Monday, April 8th, 2013. I'm William Garrison.
And I'm Michael Aune.
This week we talk a bit about the difference between faith and something like religion, and how faith in something like science isn't necessarily the same thing because of verifiable data and how the structure of science leads you to those results, where religion doesn't necessarily have the same.
Yeah, just using the same word doesn't mean you're actually talking about the same thing.
Exactly.
And then we touch on the recent sort of debacle that has sort of swarmed around Sam Harris after an unflattering article about his views was posted by a gentleman for Al Jazeera, and sort of the fallout from that. And I actually touched an article I wrote about it. And so lots of current events and highfalutin philosophical topics about words and their meanings. So it's going to be a good one. Stay tuned.
Have a watch. I don't know if this is beating a dead horse, but I did have another interesting interaction on Twitter with a guy. He was talking about how atheists are only non-believers because they haven't seen the truth. And I was like,
I don't think we've really touched on that aspect of it.
I was asking him, like, I was going back and forth with him, and I was like, we don't believe in things without evidence.
Well, let's back up, because
this was after he made some claims, and then.
Well, I mean, again, we should be careful because atheism literally has no positive defining qualities. So there are atheists who believe in ghosts and other.
Yeah, I more or less.
If you're thinking about like skeptical secularists, most likely you're going to be talking about people who are evidentiary in their outlook.
Yeah.
They want some evidence. Provide me with something.
I was basically taking it as my stance towards religion.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to believe something like religion or a god.
Well, I would say that given the claims that religion is making, yes, I don't think it's outside of the norm to ask for a little something as far as confirmation. Because the problem with religion is that there's nothing in principle I could do to achieve the same knowledge, necessarily. Like, yes, I take it on faith that quantum mechanics does hold true at extreme temperatures.
Did you see the Richard Dawkins video?
Which one?
Science, it works, bitches.
Oh, yeah. Well, I should say I saw a link to it. I've seen some of his other stuff that touches on it, but I don't think I've seen that particular one.
Well, he got asked by a member of the audience. He's like, well, don't you take certain bits of science or something as a matter of faith? And he's like, well, the difference between science and religion is like when you base something on science, it works. When we base...
Well, the idea is that you can repeat it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, look, it's practically impossible for me to go build a particle accelerator that's capable of finding the Higgs boson. But the fact of the matter is, I could do it, or I could go there and I could reproduce the experiments and the numbers, and if I know the math, I could crunch it and arrive at the same conclusion. I can build a tunneling electron microscope, and then I could see molecular structures. So yes, I can't see them right now, but the idea is that in principle, I could actually do this
It's
thing.
that repeatability, and I think the structure of science, and we should definitely talk about this in the podcast.
Oh, we're not right now? Because I'm totally...
Oh, sorry, I thought we were just...
Oh, no.
Sorry.
I've already hit start. We're committed. So, get your game face on.
We want to just edit this out?
My game face is this. I don't know what yours is. That's...
something...
Are you ill-prepared?
It's hard for me to
Are you
hold
ill-prepared for this game? Because that's an interesting face to make, I would say. That's... We had like 4 people who follow us, and now they're all gone. The moment our website died was the moment you made that face.
I apologize for nothing.
Anyway, so back to the topic. Science is in principle repeatable and verifiable for the individual who's questioning the premise. Religion is not the same.
Right, and what Richard Dawkins was saying is that the structure of science is something that allows people to achieve things, which isn't something that religion can claim. In that he was
not
like
worldly things.
He was like, when we follow science, we can cure disease. When we follow science, we can get to the moon. We can fly airplanes.
Science is responsible for all of what we're currently using to make this podcast.
Right.
All of that is dependent on previous beliefs, which have been used to, move to the next step. So, oh, hey, here's how electricity works. And they go, hey, do you know you can actually manipulate currents to perform mathematical functions? Oh, cool. So now I have a processing unit, which I can slap eventually into a small device. And now I have a cell phone. Like, there's a long history of beliefs compounding.
Glasses, watch.
Your faith is basically guaranteed to pay off. Whereas with religion, your payoff could be there. I mean, some people feel an immediate satisfaction, and that's fair.
I would just argue that there has been no verifiable payoff for anyone in terms of religion outside of
you can't prove that
spiritual inner feeling. Like,
you can't prove that it was actually due to the involvement of the object of the religious person's attention. So you can't say that it was God. You can say that they felt better.
It's like,
but you can't necessarily say that God made them feel better.
Well, and people do that, and that's part of the problem. Like, let's say my father's in the hospital and he has some disease, and I prayed to God enough and he's cured. Obviously, it was God's doing. It had nothing to do with the doctor or the medicines he was given or surgery or any of that.
There is a tendency, I think, to overlook obvious causal chains sometimes, but I'm hard-pressed to be too mad at that, because I think the idea is that you could be glorifying God through medicine.
Well, and we've talked about it before. The easy jump to God just has to do with our understanding. And me as a layman in a hospital, if I'm told your dad has a 1% chance of living, and then I'm breaking down, I'm crying,
you're going through
praying
a spiritual
to a God
crisis
for a couple of nights or whatever, just hoping he makes it through, and he does. I'm like, they said 1%. I'm no mathematician, but that sounds pretty small. He lived, therefore God.
I can't remember who it was, and I just was reading about this, but he goes, if you look at the number of individual events that comprise a day, and let's say you gave them a numerical value, so it's 800 discrete events comprise a day, which means there's X number of events per week, per month, blah, blah, blah. He goes, the idea is that, you basically have, I think his estimate was, I can't remember who it was, 1 million per month, or maybe it was 1 million per year. But the idea is, at some point, something unexpected is going to occur. When 1 million things happen, a few things are going to stand out as weird, just on chance.
Right.
The fact that more don't, in a sense, is the miracle, not that, wow, that bird almost hit me, and I just, I happened to turn my head at the right moment, and it hit my friends in the head instead. And you're like, okay, but what about all the other things that did happen the way that you expected? Well, or one outlier does not a miracle make.
Or the side. I see this on Reddit all the time. I don't think you subscribe anymore. I still subscribe for random pieces, mainly Facebook pictures. It's /r/atheism, the atheism
I'm still
subreddit.
Subscribed. I go there for a particular purpose, which is to be amused.
Not necessarily
I go to true atheism if I
rational
want
discourse, right?
The talk.
But they'll show pictures from Facebook and be like, oh, I was in traffic, I was 10 minutes late, I missed my flight, the flight crashed, everyone died or whatever.
Yeah.
Praise the Lord. You're like, well, what happened to the people that were on the plane? Were they not spiritual enough?
Well, what about the fact that there are usually people who are trying to fly standby and can't because the plane is full? So that means that there's 2 or 3 people on average per flight during a day who would be saved if the plane went down. And again, it's not to get hung up on the examples, because the examples really don't matter. The idea is that
what I'm saying is, for accounting for those, it's random chance that you happen to not be on that plane that went down. And so rather than trying to explain it by a supernatural being, it would make more sense to be like, oh, this is just one of those random times in the month or the year that can be explained just
and sometimes
by random chance.
By the sheer number of people, some of them are going to seem more miraculous than others.
Yeah.
So the fact that the bird pooped on my friend and not me, small miracle. The fact that
maybe
my
he gets
friend got on the
often.
plane but not me, big miracle.
Right.
It can change pretty dramatically depending on the scope, but the actual idea is that the causal nature isn't very different. It's like a small event that can be magnified by following events. But
either way,
I like what Hume said, which was, to paraphrase horribly, what's more likely that, all of the evidence that normally comprises your life, all of the rules that the world follows and all these things are laid aside to help you, or that you simply don't really know what's going on. Like you misinterpreted something, or you're missing relevant information. So is it more likely that God suspended the laws of nature to let you get away with something or whatever, or that you simply aren't aware of the other parts of the circumstance that let you get away with it?
That you don't take it as a whole. And I think that's another part of like the human complex, I guess, of thinking that the world revolves around you as a person.
Which
like
makes sense.
anytime they talk about having a personal relationship with God, it's like it's that one-on-one thing. The world is around me, not I'm around the world. And that's the same thing I think with miracles. Sometimes it's hard for people to put themselves in other people's shoes or to sympathize with someone, especially if they don't know them personally, or if they can't see them. If I see on the news that a plane crashed and 50 people were dead, I can picture that horror. I can picture the death and all of that stuff.
But it's over there.
It's over there. It would be way different if I knew the 50 people on the plane, if I saw it happening.
Yeah, I should say we mean emotionally over there, not the plane crashes over there.
Yeah.
So you don't care. Let's not be too literal here.
It's another interesting piece of the human brain.
Yeah,
is how we interact with news and information and
Well, again, we have our tiny little window onto world events, and we put reality in our little categories, and we go about our business, and most of the time those categories work, But then we don't have a perfect view of the world when we have an incomplete view of the world. So not only are we wrong about many of our assumptions, we're not perfect at modeling the world. So like when it comes to math and probabilities and all, like humans are terrible at that. Consistently will err in ways that are measurable, like across gender, race, age. People are just bad at that. And so since a lot of the world is kind of random and chancy and filled with unknowns, of course there are going to be times where things just don't make sense, or they kind of like feel special because I can't believe it happened that way.
I can't believe the Pope resigned.
Awesome. Dude, I'm going to miss those red Prada shoes. I don't know. The new Pope, he's not nearly as fashionable. So
he's I have a feeling we won't be reading as many articles about like, oh, here's the crazy amount of money, or this is the crazy thing the Pope did today that is nothing like, what a normal person does, or
which is good.
He's a little more humble.
Again, if I'm going to be pragmatic, I'm going to say, hey, I'm glad that you aren't the head of a self-centered, self-aggrandizing organization that has systematically abused its youngest and most vulnerable parishioners and has led to untold deaths in Africa and wherever else because of your prohibition against contraception and all that. I'm okay with a guy who seems to maybe have some sort of priority towards helping the vulnerable and the poor. And so, as a humanist who wants people to be okay and to thrive, I'm okay with the new Pope from that angle. I still think he basically sits on top of a pile of false beliefs, and some of them probably outright lies, but that doesn't mean that
the head of an organization that we don't like, that overall is not a cause for good in the world. To flash back to an older a debate that Stephen Fry was a part of, which is pretty awesome.
The Intelligence
Squared debate,
which is really good if you haven't seen it. It's got Hitchens and Fry versus she was a British MP, and then an African bishop or cardinal, bishop, and it's good. If nothing else, I think there is a strong emotional argument to be made, and I think Stephen Fry makes it quite well, about whether or not the Catholic force is currently a force for good in the world. He comes down on the no side, fancy that. But when someone who seems to be as loving as Stephen Fry says that seems to be a pretty damning.
He gets very emotional,
condemnation.
so it's a good one.
We should throw up a link to that at some point under the article or the podcast.
Yeah.
I mean. Which let's see, what else is new for us 37G guys? If you haven't checked it out already, there's an article about the recent flap with Sam Harris, and basically he was characterized, I believe, unfairly. Whether or not you like Sam Harris is beyond the point, but whatever. By Murtaza Hussain, which was then retweeted by a journalist named Glenn Greenwald, who's got about 125,000 followers, to which Harris took some offense, given that he didn't feel that he was characterized properly. And so it sort of created this furor about people lining up to just defend Harris,
It's all categorized into
fanboys,
this new atheism, Islamophobia.
Yeah.
Like, that's what it gets tagged under. And obviously Sam Harrison, going back and forth, he basically discusses, like, I'm not treating Islam any differently than...
He just thinks that right now, pragmatically, Islam is the current threat. Christianity's been neutered by secularism. It's not that big a deal for us to worry about. You can argue the merits of that. That's fine. But anyway, interesting to see the people line up, because he's a man who is at least respected for his public voice as one of the more vocal proponents of secular atheism. But even within atheism, there are quite a few people who disagree with the new atheism movement. The idea that atheism should be proactively attacking or engaging against religion in the world. And so it was a very interesting week or so to hear people line up on that. And I wrote about not whether or not you agree with him, but why it matters that I believe he was unfairly characterized by Hussein. And so whether or not you actually agree with the argument, the idea that the argument should be fairly presented whenever it comes up of any type, because this is a leading proponent for secular atheism, and it matters to us, indirectly at least.
Yeah.
Because if he's knocked down, that's sort of a victory for the religious, in a sense.
Well, and how we talked about the retweeting of the article in a general tagline that mentioned Harris,
which seemed at least condoning of Hussein's article. It wasn't he wasn't overtly saying that it was great. He was just saying that it was, something to check out, which I guess if you thought this article was crap, you would call it out as such. But
yeah.
Anyway, so that's up. When I just thought it was interesting timing, because I just finished The Moral Landscape, because I'm like 5 years behind on books. And so yeah, I'm going to be doing a book report on that, following up on The End of Faith. So I just happened to have read Sarah Harris's books, kind of just picked an author at random and burned through them, and now all this stuff's been coming up about it. So it's been interesting. So yeah, that'll be out. Actually, it'll probably have just come out. This is going to post the beginning of the week. It probably will just come out. And so keep an eye out for the 37G book report on The Moral Landscape. It's
Awesome.
an interesting book.
And I know we've mentioned it before, but our book reports will be not necessarily the book report you would think of doing in high school, talking about literary styles or,
Is that not what people want?
maybe I'm a grammar nut, and I love literature just like anyone, but
Deconstructionism and feminist critique and all that, we're not going to...
More or less covering, correct me if I'm wrong, but more or less covering the topics that the author covers and summarizing their viewpoints, and not necessarily critiquing them individually or saying that it was a good book or was not a good book. Or
I sort of want it I want them to be sort of just resources or like a primer, so that
If you were thinking about...
If you haven't read it, you kind of want to know what it is about.
Yeah.
So I basically try and summarize the major thoughts within the book, and then respond to them, at least from a personal viewpoint. You know, does he make this point well or not, or has he thought about this, or does he seem lacking in that? And you know, it's not supposed to be a critique, and it's not supposed to be some sort of dry, just abstraction of the work. So I hope you'll find them useful. I'm going to try and do it, aiming for one a month. We'll see if I can do better, and then get that pumped out for a variety of authors. Which I'm actually looking for suggestions. So if you have anyone, please let me know, because obviously they're sort of the mainstays, but I'm looking to branch out, since I know they're more articulate people, I guess you would call them, or at least more maybe philosophically inclined from my school days back in the day. Yeah.
Back in my day.
But, you know, and I still plan on putting out some philosophy articles and all that. But anyway, there's more stuff coming down the pipeline, and we'll see what current events throws at us. And as always, stay tuned and follow us and talk to us. And you can yell at him on Twitter. He loves yelling back.
Yep. It's what I do. What I do in my free time.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah. It's pretty good. Pretty good. I
All
got
right.
schooled in Twitter today.
Yeah?
Sort of embarrassing. Yeah. I didn't realize you have to put a period in front of, or something, to break up
Yeah, I don't know if
person's
I
name.
don't think a space works.
Apparently, it doesn't.
Yeah.
From the research I was doing, but yeah, that was trying to compliment someone on an article they wrote, actually about the Sam Harris topic. And he tweets back, you know, hey, thanks, but no one else saw that. And I go, why? And he's like, oh, well, because of the way you phrased it, it's only visible to our mutual friends and us, and we have no mutual followers. So I go, oh, okay, I'll try it again. So that was awesome.
Yeah.
Great first impressions. But thanks to Communist for teaching me how to tweet like a real boy. That was helpful. And now I will hopefully not make an ass of myself to the world and my 14 followers again.
That'll grow.
One day I'm going to hit 20.
You'll be 20 by the end of 2013,
20!
I guarantee it.
Anyway, check back in next week. Hit up the articles if you haven't and are so inclined. And, you know, if you see something interesting, let us know. We're always happy to scope out new stuff.
Awesome. Well, thanks.
See you next week.
I'm feeling quite a bit tired. Not tired, just like mentally weak from work. That was alright. Just... Alright, do an intro. What are we talking about?
This is the problem. We already need it done so we can watch it.
Definitely winning.
Oh my god. Oh my god. This article for the Los Angeles Times is States joust in a game of drones. Honey!